Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the International Trade Q&A. If I could quickly ask you to just go around the table and introduce yourselves, it would be appreciated. Perhaps I could start with you, Jessie.
Yeah, you can indeed. Hi, everyone. Fantastic to be here. My name is Jessie, and I'm the founder of Planet 1.5. I used to say that we are saving the planet one business at a time. That's our intention, at least. So what we do is that we help businesses put sustainability at the heart of their organization. So we evaluate value chains, operations, and when you earn the right to talk about what you do, we help you amplify that to what people could be interested in that.
Thank you, Jessie. Next on my screen is Hayden.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hayden Green. I'm calling from South Africa. I've got two hats on here. One is that I'm a food producer, and I would like to learn more about exports. And the other hat on is I'm a ESG and sustainability consultant, and we enable clients to manage their business better from a sustainability perspective. So normally I'm looking at imports into the UK, but it's very interesting listening to UK trying to import into Africa.
Gamu, you're next. Thank you, Hayden.
Hi everyone. My name is Gamu Matarira. I'm the founder and CEO of Gen A Consultancy, which is based in the west of England, in Bristol. So basically, we help international businesses who are looking for growth in the African marketplace to do so through strategic partnerships, and in parallel work with local leaders in Africa with their local initiatives, and also to build that pipeline of SMEs as the strategic partners. So really good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gamu. Ravish.
Hi, Roger.
If you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. Hi, my name is Ravish Arora. I'm the director at the In-Venue Hospitality. I'm based out of Pune, Maharashtra, India, close to Mumbai. We run a company which operates restaurants, bakery, caterings, hospital catering. So I am a B2C guy, understand the customer perspective and the consumer perspective, and the changes which are happening in the country at the currently post-pandemic vis-a-vis pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Ravish. Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Baines. I'm based here in Gloucestershire, and I'm an independent consultant over the last 20 or so years working in the UK and internationally. My particular interest is helping farmers connect to value supply chains, whether they're short local supply chains or international supply chains. And my second hat is that I've recently become a director of a business-to-business cooperative here in the Cotswold called Cotswold Taste, primarily looking at the local food models, but also a number of members would be interested in obviously exporting or growing their markets elsewhere, and a number are doing that already, aren't they, Roger?
Yeah, they are, yeah. Thank you, Richard. Well, just to finalise it, I'm Roger McCrill. I also wear two hats. I have a company we founded 3 years ago on the Great British Rare Breed Pig Company. We are supplying rare breed pork into the Asian market, particularly Singapore, Hong Kong and mainland China. We've been doing that through a multitude of activities, and the business is thankfully growing on the export front. The other business I run is Sabre UK, which I founded back in 2006. We have resources here in the UK, in the Cotswolds, and resources in India and in China in particular, as well as the US, sitting on the ground. And we facilitate clients, customers looking for entry into those markets. We carry out all the necessary entry analysis, market analysis, partnership, hand-holding, and so forth, to guide them into those markets, most times and every time so far successfully. So that's what we do. Right, we're short of Mark. I don't know where he's got to. He's probably on another panel at the moment. I don't know. Anyway, I've distilled some of the questions that came out of our previous two meetings, both on food and the forum. And really, the first one is, where does an SME sales MG on Mercedes? Try again. The first one is, where does an SME find help in understanding export documentation and the detailed requirements? Is that something you could start with, Richard?
Well, actually, I'm in the position of trying to find that out myself, so I was looking forward to the answers from other people. I mean, I think obviously I'm finding that the work that I've been involved in the last few days has been very much about the UK government trying to help us do better business and making business easy between partners for both import and export. So that would probably be my first port of call to see what's happening, and then see who the regional links are for that, and start to make contact. So I'm still learning on that particular one.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think probably everyone is. Jessie, any views on that?
Me?
Yeah.
So I don't personally export a lot of things, but I know via our network at the Danish embassy that a lot of Danish and Nordic organizations, they have a lot of support by reaching out there. So I say look to not only your own embassy, but also the embassy located locally towards where you're looking to export, because there's so much there's so many events like this, there's so much support together in that way, and meet people that are in the same boat. I think that would be my approach to it.
Can I just support on that? I mean, about 4 years ago, through the then chairman of Cotswold Taste, I had a really interesting day with the agriculture attaché of the Russian embassy, and wanted to find out there. It was quite interesting about what they were interested in, and what we found focused on that particular one was very much around food and tourism, the two coming together. So yeah, I agree with what Jessie's saying there. You know, the attaches in the embassies are a good point to go to.
Gamu.
Yeah, so I would say, just to get some general information, gov.uk is a great starting point. You can check for information on duties, customs, exporting goods and services there. There's another free facility called the Open to Export. There's a website, Open to Export website, and that's been set up by the Institute of Export and International Trade, and is dedicated to helping small UK businesses get ready to export and expand internationally. Of course, local chambers of commerce here in the UK and in the country you're actually considering going into are a fantastic source. I think what's important is that, each country has its own list of what it considers to be regulated products or exempted products, which are certain categorized products, goods that may not be, they may not need certification to enter the country. So it's country specific, and some countries also have a list of prohibited goods that aren't allowed to enter the country under any circumstances. So I would always say, start generically, you can get some of that information from gov.uk, Open to Export, but more precisely, the local chambers are a good place as well.
Yeah, I think they're a good starting point. Ravish, it might be interesting to know how would we look in India to establish what documentation we need for importing?
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I might be limited in my knowledge on the subject, but whatever I understand from the people who are importing, who are exporting and who are in this business, they feel the government is pretty friendly now, and they find it much easier to export. In fact, they are supporting. India has probably touched the maximum export. That's what the Prime Minister also probably mentioned in the Parliament the other day. On that front. So I guess it's pretty easy in terms of getting it, if you are within that zone of what you want to export. The only challenge is with China, that's it. Anything from China is disrupting. We have a lot of issues with products coming from China, probably non-food also and food also. And exporting to China also is an issue in this country. But otherwise, government, as I understand, is very, very proactive in terms of exports, extremely proactive, and the systems and the documentation are far more easier is what everybody shares with us. All the vendors who are, are associated with exports and who deal with us, from whom we are coordinating with.
Yeah, I think that's quite true. I think your Prime Minister and the trade associations have pushed for ease on export controls, haven't they, dramatically?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly.
Hayden, how easy is it to export into South Africa?
Well, for the UK, it's relatively, we got trade agreements in place, so it's relatively simple. So you have to see it from a country and a sub-region and a region perspective. Obviously, from South Africa's perspective, the South African Revenue Service has got a great guideline on its website of how to import and what the regulations are. Then there's a bigger picture, which is South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini, previously known as Swaziland, Namibia, and Lesotho. That's called the South African Customs Union, and they've also got very easy to use processes about how easy it is to import from which country. And then obviously from a broader perspective, which includes the rest of Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, that would be South African Development Community. They've all got the information easy to use on the website.
Thank you. It might be interesting, on the food and drink side, there's the Food and Drink Federation, which have a very comprehensive website on exporting to various countries and the documentation that is required to meet those requirements. Something, Richard, you might be aware of, I don't know.
I'm aware of it, yes. I've looked more at the sort of agricultural elements going out from those there, which sometimes means that you're still sitting with very much government bodies who are setting the standards on there. I think with the Food and Drink Federation, one of the ways in which I think they're influenced or that they're looking at is the way in which private standards operate, which often embed government requirements, but then go further in terms of what the market wants. So I think really, again, it's through those is looking to see what sort of standards you need to look at to get into particular markets.
It was interesting, Ravish's comment on China. Obviously dealing with China, there is this perception that China is quite difficult to deal with. I think taking the point that Gamu made, and I think Jesse made, if you care to spend time talking to trade associations and the embassy, there is certainly a lot of information about how to trade with China.
Sure.
The situation relative to China out of the UK is quite well documented, and I have to say that experience shows it is not that difficult to deal with China, providing you know the route through the treacle.
I would agree on that, but it's all more geopolitical, political issues rather than the process driven and the sentiments which gets driven through that, and that has led to, for example, I mean, it's not a food related, but India imports a lot of paper pulp from China, which obviously is now not coming in. And the cost of paper, I mean, we generally use them for packaging and we use them for bakery products, and it's skyrocketed at least by 70–80%. And everybody's dealing with all these issues. This is where the disruption is happening.
Yes, the geopolitical situation, isn't it, between India and China? One only hopes that doesn't spread worldwide. So,
I hope so.
Right. Let's focus a little bit on the territories where opportunities might exist. Gamu, I wonder if you give us a view on what opportunities might exist in Africa, on the African continent, and how one might access those opportunities from an SME point of view.
Sure. So now more and more companies are actually looking to export to Africa as the continent is actually experiencing rapid development. With the population projected to reach 1.7 billion people by 2030, rising incomes across much of the continent. There are loads of business opportunities in the consumer market, and that the consumer market alone is actually accounting for 50–60% of the growth of the continent. So this fast-growing population and the markets actually present opportunities, in terms of new supply chains. There are 54 markets to source from, which are grouped together by region and divided into 6 different trade zones, 5 of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have SADC, which is a Southern African Development Community. You've got the Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. You have the East African Community, and you also have COMESA, which is the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. So in terms of opportunities in Southern Africa, I mean, South Africa is a perfect entry point for the sub-Saharan region with a large population of 60 million people, very strong ties with the West and a robust infrastructure. And, you know, there's an increase of both men and women who are sort of leaving their homes to go to work. So African consumers are actually purchasing more and more packaged and processed foods. Powdered milk, cereals, sweetened drinks, for example, are a growing percentage of the processed food consumed in Africa, although also contributing to health problems across the continent. We have to be aware of that as well. But it must be noted that, you know, agricultural safeguard measures have been included in the Southern African Customs Union member states agreement with the UK. And these allow the countries within the pact to impose higher import tariffs on specific products if the import volume exceeds an agreed threshold. And the trigger levels came about when the UK, you know, decided to leave the EU. So currently, key industries that present opportunities are education, construction, healthcare, technological services, agriculture and the entire supply chain that complements the industry, manufacturing, of course, and production, renewable energy, local and regional infrastructure, entrepreneurship, as well as NGOs. And if you go onto platforms such as the African Financial Services Investment Forum, AFSIC, you'll see that they list opportunities going into Africa. And we ourselves, JNA, work in partnership with several in-country organizations that have been independently set up to promote trade and investment. So for example, there's the Ghana Investment Promotion Center and the Zimbabwean Investment Development Agency, just to name a couple. And of course, as I said already, local chambers of commerce can also be another source of you know, information in terms of what those opportunities are.
Thank you, Gemma. Hayden, did you want to add anything to that at all?
No, I couldn't add to Ambassador Gummer's any more information than what the ambassador's already said.
I thought that might be the case.
I think, Roger, just a comment. Gamu wasn't in our discussion this morning. She was in a separate one. One of the points I raised, Gamu, was the fact that Africa is also urbanizing very quickly, which means that you know, supplying to urban centres means it's more targeted and focused. But I also made the comment that a significant number of people who are coming into the urban environment are going to be suffering from extreme poverty, and their sourcing of food is probably going to be likely to be street food, if anything, and it's going to be largely unregulated. However, there is still a significant middle and upper class in those urban centres that people can target. But there's a recognition that there is the poverty side of the food discussion in Africa that needs to be addressed, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, like you rightly pointed out, 70% of most African countries actually is made up of the rural community. And yes, with urbanization, there's this massive influx towards the centers. But what's also really interesting is the kind of initiatives that are coming up on the ground to try to create more hubs outside the urban centers, because they're becoming way too populated. And of course, people are migrating in search of jobs that don't actually exist. So there needs to be more sort of training centers. I know I'm actually speaking to the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, where they're discussing creating centers of excellence in peri-urban areas rather than in the center, so that we start to take that, you know, that flow outward. But you're absolutely right. Poverty is definitely, you know, something that needs to be discussed, because of course there's two economies, aren't there? There's the informal sector and then there's the formal sector. And I think a lot of the kind of the people you're discussing are caught up in the informal trading sector of Africa. And it's about how to sort of, it's not just about how to bring them more into the formal sector, but I think it's about how to harness what's actually currently happening there in such a way that, you know, leveraging it, but as well as finding out ways to, you know, create this ecosystem, this sustainable ecosystem amongst those individuals, whereby, you know, food supply and all of that is done in such a way that, you know, it starts to alleviate some of those pressures at that level.
I think as well that we haven't mentioned it in terms of Africa, that an interesting country to look at what's happening is Nigeria. You know, a nightmare to do business with, a great to do business with in some ways. I'm still sort of overseeing a PhD student who's just completing, and we are working on rural to urban food connections, and looking at this, exactly that model about looking at sort of peri-urban space being where you can actually create hubs that may be linked to international and national hubs, but also linked to local hubs. So yeah, I agree with you. That is a key way forward.
Oh, thanks very much there. Ravish, same sort of approach in India. What are the opportunities that really are, and how does one access them in the Indian content?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It goes up. Yeah. Could you repeat, Roger? I missed your question.
Yeah, we've spoken about Africa, and really, again, right. What's the situation in India and for SMEs, and how do they access the Indian market? Particularly knowing that there is an overwhelming desire now to both import and export commodities and so forth into India.
See, in India, there is that made in India, make in India is or what they're calling vocal for local is really gained momentum than we actually thought it would. And there are enormous amount of startups which are coming in, and they're looking for association with international players on this front. And so there seems to be great opportunity for products for, products to go from here, and import and export both are happening big time. I think this, you will see it really growing up in probably a year from now, because it's just been a year, and I think India has had maximum number of startups, and more so a lot in food, processing of food. I think agriculture guys doing backward forward integration. I see a lot of these agriculture farmers coming and meeting, and they are started processing the food for export. I mean, because they always had an extra surplus, and they've started going ahead with all that. So there seems to be great opportunity for everybody on this front, especially, like I said yesterday, a lot in the dairy sector. There is always permanent shortage as far as that goes. And there is a great shortage in terms of seafood, is what I said yesterday. Great opportunity on these front, and ready-to-eat processed food. So these are the ones which are really there is an opportunity on these front.
Okay, that's good. That's a good opportunity. I was hoping Mark would be here. We talk about the Nordic countries.
Roger, just in terms of, I was having a conversation with an Indian counterpart yesterday and trying to get understand what's happening. What I gather is that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in terms of food products going to India, it's the Indian Food Safety Authority that you've got to look at in terms of what the criteria are you have to meet in terms of food safety and quality. But they actually have a separate department, their export inspection authority, which they use for Indian export to other countries. There's two bodies, one for import and one for export, and I think it's under the Department of Commerce. Ravish, I think, have I got that right?
I got it. Ministry of Commerce comes under Ministry of Commerce.
Yeah,
yes.
I was just saying that there are two agencies in India. The food, I think it's FSSA, which is responsible for food coming in and domestic, and then you got your export inspection authority for food that's being exported. And what I'm trying to work out at the moment is how well they talk to each other. Giving a perspective to what you said, Richard, is overall. So these are FSSI is the latest entrant in terms of regulating at the grassroots level till going up. And this probably, they've never been so serious. We've started taking it seriously in the last couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. And the regulations now is being, it's understood by most of the people as far as that goes. So yes, at the top level, yes. So there is a discrepancy. So there's a nodal authority, FDA and FSSI. FSSI looks at the local level, and FDA is the macro level policy making body on that front. And there's always a difference between the way they communicate with each other, which leads to a bit of an issue as far as
exporting and importing both.
Yeah.
True.
Thank you.
Right, shall I move on? Jesse, perhaps you'd like to take this question about SMEs and how they approach an understanding of their carbon footprint and their effect on it, on that effect on international trade.
Yes, absolutely. Well, oh gosh, where do you start on that? There's so many. I would say overall, I think not only it should literally be a requirement for any business out there to know their carbon footprint and the impact they have so that they can start bettering. I think one of the questions is a bit around resources as well. Like, how do you look at your resources when in some instances you have scarce resources? So I have an example of one of our clients is one of Scandinavia's largest construction companies, and we are helping them calculate their entire carbon footprint. And what they can see from a demand perspective is that timber is actually coming in demand. And I think that's interesting because there's all this talk about now we need to be sustainable, but actually is timber more sustainable than some of the more like old school solutions such as concrete piles? And I think businesses have a big job to lift here in terms of education of their customers when we're looking at what resources that are then available and what the impact actually is of what we do. And that goes across everything we do. So if you want to be attractive and you want people to make good choices that are also servicing the sustainable agenda, you need to help them make good choices by creating transparency. But I also always say that you can't guide your customers unless there's an alternative. So get ready to make the alternatives and push that to market, because that's really, yeah, does that make sense? That's what they're seeking out when it comes to sustainability. That's a little bit of a waffle.
What about from your point of view, Hayden? How do you see the effect on or the ease of understanding your carbon footprint and its effect on sustainability and the agility of your business?
So traditionally down here in the south, but just normally your listed entities that were already giving their scope 1, 2s and maybe some parts of their scope 3s in the integrated reports. But there is a big move locally and internationally, and it's going to be very interesting to see if it comes up in COP27, is the need for carbon labeling. So going from calorific and nutrient labeling and adding a carbon footprint, but finding a standardization to do it, it's going to have a massive impact in business. But I don't think people need to be scared of it. I think it'll be actually a differentiator.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. Ravish, we've seen the market in India open up, as you say. What's the approach to SMEs understanding the carbon footprint of their businesses in India?
Hi, sorry, it's just kind of.
Shall we give you a big red button, Ravish, so you can press it?
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm using a Chinese phone, so it's okay. Well, the SMEs are moving ahead with they've got a lot of government support as far as the financially their government is supporting the SMEs, and they are going forward as far as their quality and carbon footprints. They're trying to control that, and especially in the food segment, lot more support is coming in from the government on that front, especially during the pandemic time. I think the support in terms of the money available to all the SMEs is huge, and hence the amount of money being spent on controlling carbon footprints and other issues is also pretty high on this front.
Yamu, does that, how does Africa apply in that direction?
I find this really interesting because on several panels we've talked about, well, you know, what is this green strategy from an African lens, because it's not about decarbonization really. I think a lot of African companies, we had a brief exchange with Hayden on email about how climate change and the impacts of climate change are very, very different from a European standpoint than it is from an African standpoint, because, you know, Africa is on the whole, there's this understanding that yes, it's one planet and we have to look after our planet. However, when you look at the different African states and what is actually happening, I don't really hear a lot of dialogue around, well, how are we reducing CO2? Because I don't think it's the same, it's perceived as the same level, at the same level of threat as the rest of the world. But what I do find interesting is, I'll use a Zambian example because I know this is a recent initiative where Zambia has recently set up a Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. But closely related to that ministry is the UK's support for, you know, making businesses more green or helping SMEs to become more green, which means that there's a heck of a lot of funding that's been agreed upon that will trickle down through the ministry and then trickle down to SMEs. And on paper, it sounds fantastic, but I'm still waiting to see how that actually translates, because I'm not sure we're speaking the same language here. I'm not sure when the UK sort of says, you know, we want to support businesses in Africa with becoming more green, which is an important thing, by the way. I mean, I completely agree with that, because if you're trying to do cross-border international trade, it's very difficult to do so if your starting point is not the same. If the agenda for any business in the UK is actually we have to follow, you know, the green agenda, and your suppliers are coming out of Africa, well, the suppliers have to come on board with this agenda. It's just in isolation. They don't necessarily particularly work the same way. So that translation piece, I think, is slightly problematic, is my feeling. And it would be, I'm curious to see how this can be tackled actually, because yes, go on, you know, Hayden's got something to say about this, how this can be tackled in such a way that you really can get that true partnership and you know, a cross-border partnership with people that are speaking completely different languages in this particular space.
Yeah, just before you come on, Hayden, yeah. Is it a question that it is that precisely that the definition of what green is and how green is going to be developed into a sustainable situation?
I think that's what does green mean is one thing, but secondly, you know, does Africa have the resources and the technologies to do green within their processes? You know, that's another constraint, and it's a constraint in itself, as important as it is to try to come on board, right? And then of course, what does sustainability mean in the different contexts? Yeah, it would mean something different in an African context than it would in a British context. So yeah, so there's a few things that need to be unpacked there, I feel.
Hayden, you had some comments to make.
No, this is a little bit more in my field than import regulation. But,
off you go then.
Woo, woo. And there is a massive disconnect, and that disconnect is very important for trade. So, for example, at COP27, the African countries, African Union, headed up on this initiative by the South African president, is saying we need an African united policy towards what is green and how we're going to get there, and then ultimately development funding to get us there. So what is that from a high level perspective? What does that mean for imports and exports, SMEs? Well, down in Southern Africa and in Central Africa and Northern Africa, energy here is an energy security issue, and it's an energy supply issue. So when people talk renewable energy, they're looking at it from an energy security perspective. So that does open up, but it begs the question, I'm talking from the food and manufacturing sector, that South Africa and the rest of Africa are developing, but the most of Africa are leaving South Africa behind from a growth perspective. So the future of most food is going to be grown in Africa. So there's a lot of research out there that food production, if you look at calorific value, is going to be coming from Africa. So there is a great opportunity to partner with services, partner with infrastructure, and get your brand into this country as a brand, as a company brand that's partnering with local companies to build an international brand. So instead of, I don't think we should look small. I think we should look towards partnering with existing producers in Africa to form a company or an entity that can grow the UK businesses from a revenue and a dividends perspective, but also to expand their interests in partnering with Africa. So it's a different model than the traditional European-African relationship in the past, but it's one that can really work. And I think the UK and Europe need to move fast, because China are realizing that it's an important trading partner, and you can see it all throughout Africa.
I think that's a really important comment, Hayden. That I think the US and also, if you said the West donors have always seen Africa as really being an issue around poverty alleviation, whereas the East is seeing Africa as a business opportunity. And I think we in the West need to, if we want to have access to the land that's going to produce the food that's going to help feed Europe, we need the partnerships that you're talking about, definitely. But I would go say there's also activities happening at the level. I mean, Hayden, your regenerative agriculture with your beef, that is has got a really strong climate change argument, because you're actually using it to build carbon back into the soil and maintain your productivity. So there's individual business technologies you can use as well, isn't there?
There is. I mean, there's a partnership around, I read it this morning actually, the 1 acre of rehabilitated ground grazed with sheep can sequester 1 ton over a few years, so if you work at 1 acre, 1 ton over a few years, you think, well, there's a great opportunity, so it's an opportunity for UK people as well. But I'm on a trading platform at the moment that's using the European-based trading platform that is looking at paying me out once I go through the process on regenerative grazing.
Yeah.
And the carbon sequestration that I'm happening. So yes, on one point I've got a heavy footprint, so it's between 7 and 8 tons, but I'm sequestering much more than that, and I'm proving it at the moment. But that's a great opportunity for partnerships as well.
But it also means that when you're selling your beef, you can actually sell it as being beef that's actually got a positive carbon account rather than a negative one. And that might avoid any taxes, mightn't it, in that area?
Yes, there will be, but there's also that's a great differentiation between, and the people like the word regenerative agriculture, and it's actually one of the greatest methods of sequestration and the most proven point of sequestration in the world. And then if you look at the African continent, that hasn't been really managed regeneratively, it's a great opportunity to invest and partner with products. And let's be honest here, Africa has got resources. We've got good climate, therefore good weather. We've got good soil, so we can grow things, and we've got mineral resources that are needed in the renewable energy economy. So I agree with you, Richard. This is a partnership opportunity across the sector, not just food and beverage, manufacturing. It's a great opportunity. Green hydrogen is taking off radically, and it is going to change the world, because it's another option for renewable energy and greening without actually getting rid of an actual engine. So that's all happening in Africa, and I think it's a partnership. The China model is working really well, and I think the UK or the Western model can climb aboard that train.
We've actually got a regenerative sort of experimental farm here in Gloucestershire that's working in exactly the same way. So it's becoming increasingly popular. People look at regen as going beyond sustainability, because it's about rebuilding what we've lost rather than just sustaining what we've got. Another point, Roger, if I can just do it from a SME point of view in the UK, picking up on Jesse's comment, I'm finding that with our members in Cotswold Taste, I'm quite pleased to discover that that quite a number are now B corporations under this sort of global compact model, and that's creating some way in which they can demonstrate what they are doing from an environmental perspective. And I think that's a good initiative. I'm sure Jesse knows more about it than I do, but I'm seeing more of it in businesses than I did do 5 years ago. So there is movement.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And as you say, the China model needs to be considered very carefully, because they are making significant headways into Africa.
Yeah.
And obviously they're also making headways, as we said this morning, across the Belt Road initiative as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting time in terms of the dynamics of international trade, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jesse, you asked a question this morning which was very interesting, and perhaps we should ask it again. How many of us know what our carbon footprint is?
Yeah, how many does?
Well, I don't.
Can I I don't know what mine is myself, but it's probably not that good. But I've done a fair bit of sort of trying to help students understand carbon footprinting over probably the last 10 or 15 years. And we've also done 2 or 3 breweries where we've done it as a case in point. But in the agriculture sector, there are various software programs out there that farmers can use to calculate their carbon footprint, but most of them have got some serious flaws in them and some bad assumptions. They need working on a lot more. But when it comes to other businesses, we try to help businesses look at their sort of annual recurring carbon footprint and not getting trapped into the life cycle model. And we very much try and help them tie it to their sort of annual accounts, where they know what they've financially done with everything. Then they can actually start to look what the carbon cost is around that. And as Jesse was saying before, it's about finding the hotspots where things can be done quickly that can have a big impact, and then you get confidence to do the more difficult things.
That's right. Ravish, you didn't put your finger up or down on the carbon footprint.
Okay.
There's room for improvement, that's what we gather.
So we are among the highest guzzler of gasoline in the world, so there's nothing much we can say, but there is a lot of progress as far as this goes. Solar is gone big way in this country in terms of most of the farmers and most of the people who are now into SMEs are looking for alternate energies, alternate resources for getting their business going. And there is a significant change as far as that goes. And there is extreme amount of subsidy which comes from government if you are into a solar or you're using an electric vehicle on that front. And so it's making a change, and the change is more towards sustainable business. Every business house, small or large, talks about sustainable business today in the country. And that's making a big change as we go forward.
Yep, that's good. Sorry, Hayden, did you want to?
There was a theme earlier this morning, I think, for you. It was demystifying, and what's coming through on this one is it's more a differentiation. Everyone is afraid of the carbon and the standards, and we should actually embrace it to differentiate us, from our competitors. That whole blue ocean analogy, why compete if you can just completely differentiate yourself?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say that I have one concern over the way in which the debate's going around decarboning our industries and our societies, is that we're actually reducing everything to a single measure. And that can be a problem. For example, you may have a farmer whose carbon footprint is not too bad, maybe within the sort of bounds of being quite reasonable, but they could actually be crucifying biodiversity, which is another aspect of environment, and part of our heritage that impacts on our social well-being. So I think we need a bit of caution about just trying to drive carbon all the while. We need to see it in the context of other aspects of environment that societies value. Even if it's just the view of the landscape, that's an environmental parameter.
Mm.
I think, can I jump on the back of that? I think there was, I can't remember who said it, but there's a bit of confusion about what is sustainability really. And I think I always push people towards the 17 SDGs and saying it is actually more than carbon and environment. It is also driving financial value. It is a matter of driving social good and seeing it as from a systemic perspective, where everything is just dependent on each other, and as soon as you pull one string, the entire cart house falls right underneath it, right? Because everything really works together. I also think really recognizing that, okay, this is a challenge, but what are the benefits? So there's some research made recently saying the second most visited company page for just across businesses is actually the sustainability section. So if you're out there trying to attract the younger people into your business, especially, then you got to have the right signaling value. You do that by actually doing the job. That's when you start attracting your customers, because you inflect and this is really a big point of a conversation that we have, especially with new clients, that they're scared of not doing good enough, because all of a sudden your brand value is projected up to your clients. So they're choosing you as a supplier based on the narrative you tell about them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I think there's all of these opportunities to be aware about by doing the work well, being regulation ready, having it as a pair of glasses, where before we would innovate to get more market share and more opportunities, but based on what we're good at. Now we are innovating to be more sustainable, and that becomes the competitive advantage. And I think that's fantastic.
Aren't we really talking here, taking both your points, aren't we really talking here about looking at wasting resources and how we can measure those wasted resources?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a really good British Sugar. Have you ever heard about that case study? So British Sugar is also, as far as I'm aware, the biggest supplier of tomatoes in the UK. So they figured in the process of producing sugar, they have a lot of excess heat coming out of that. And that excess heat is then tunneled into their houses where they grow tomatoes. And it's just, the waste is not always waste. The waste can be someone else's opportunity or your own opportunity, and really utilizing that.
Yeah, so
that's right.
Yeah, so Thanis Earth is the big greenhouse group that benefit from that.
But again, it's looking at the wasted resources, and as you said, either we can minimize them or they can be reused by a second or third party, who knows.
Exactly.
And I think that's the benefit that comes from the carbon footprinting sort of philosophy and methodology, is the fact that you're looking at where all those are going, and then what resource there could be for others going through there. And again, you're attaching a financial value to it in one sense, because that's what businesses drive themselves by. And if we want to define sustainability, we often look at the three dimensions of economic, environmental, and social. And if you look at those in that order, that's the dominance. Economic is always going to dominate at the moment because we have good measures, accepted measures, accountants use on us every year and charge us for it. Environment is getting better at being able to define parameters and measures, but how do you measure social value? And that's why it becomes a poor partner, is because it's difficult to measure. How do you measure well-being? And a sense of belonging and all these types of things. So I think there's that, but we've also got to look at the intergenerational, what are we leaving for the next generation, and also the across the planet, those that have and those that have not. Those are all dimensions of social sustainability, and how do you build all those in? It's a difficult thing. I guess you can think global, act local is probably the easiest cop out for it.
Is it a bit of a philosophy that you eat the elephant in small chunks? You know, it's an elephant as it is at the moment, and it was the same with the likes of lean manufacturing and lean business activities. You know, it was, people looked at it as wide as this. Well, you narrow it down and you start progressively like a funnel, opening up your opportunities.
It is interesting that that's with the social aspect, because you're saying, how do you measure it? And it's hard to measure. So we always go out and do qualitative research, and it's a matter of who is it important for is the first question, really, because what's important for the business is not always what's important to the customers or the society that you operate within. So let's say an example is employee well-being. Well, that might be really important to your business because you want to retain employees, but it's not that important for your customers. So what ranks high for you is not necessarily what ranks high for them. So it's really important to find that balance between high for you and high for the customers, but not ignoring the ones that are not as high for customers, if that makes sense. And then start working your way backwards with the different areas that you identified.
From everything that I'm hearing everyone say, I think a key thing for SMEs, just bringing it back to the SMEs, is to really challenge the SMEs to take another look at their business models, right? It's like, you know, be open to revamping your business models, considering the constant changes and considering the number of different angles you have to consider in your business nowadays in order to, you know, keep up with the trends, but also to satisfy, you know, stakeholders' expectations at the same time. And yes, you can't do everything at the same time, but this is why I believe collaboration and partnership is so important, because there are people in this ecosystem that do certain aspects of what you'd like to do, you know, far better than you do. And, you know, and if people are working much more collaboratively, I think we get there faster and you get more aspects of the business life cycle covered more comprehensively.
I guess that brings us to where we were this morning, and that was in terms of demystifying international trade. We came up with this very imaginative word, fundamentally to look at how we can simplify and bring our expertise towards helping SMEs. I think we came to the conclusion this morning, as Richard and really Gamu's made the same point, it's one of cooperation. How do we develop this cooperative model between the groups that we have? For example, over the last 2 days, we've had a panel of very a panel of expertise, which have inputted a significant amount of knowledge. How do you think we might just bring that together for the last 15 minutes?
So interestingly, collaboration doesn't seem to roll off the tongue of people, which personally surprised me, you know, in my journey as a business owner. However, I do think there are some institutions and some organizations or organized groups that are done in such a way that they sort of support or encourage collaboration. I think it starts with networking with like-minded individuals, as we are right now. And I think it's about listening to, because as we're talking, it's so important to draw out what are those key strands that are coming out of the conversation, and more importantly, do something with it. You know, you don't want it to end here as a fantastic, eye-opening, insightful conversation, which has been great. I think it's about, we've identified certain things, and I think we have to be willing to be owners of, you know, where we take it, what we do with what we've identified in a space that we're currently interested in. And I think for a lot of other people out there, it's about demonstration. Once we demonstrate, others follow, come on board, and then you kind of create that sort of movement. I think it takes time, but I think it starts with willing participants.
I think it also goes. You have to ask the question about the fundamental business model that most businesses operate under. You know, it's the profit for me type model and my investors. And you know, I've been fascinated by some of the experiments around social business models, where businesses are operating for the benefit of the community that they're serving, but still doing business. I think a good example of this was facilitated under Grameen system in Bangladesh, where Danone wanted to come in and set up a water bottling factory there. And of course, those that know that part of the world know that the access to safe drinking water is very difficult in Bangladesh because of heavy metal contamination, and therefore bottled water would be a sort of a, sorry, not bottled, it was actually a nutrition drink, but the because Vittel came in afterwards. Danone was on the they wanted to get into yogurt making. That was correct. Apologies. And Grameen worked with them and said, what we want you to do is to develop a business model that means that you can have your business, you can have your factory, you can do all of those things, and you recoup on your investment, but the profits that would go to shareholders actually goes to help build the community. And part of that was to make sure that every child could get a small Danone drink, which would actually be fortified for all of the essential minerals and elements they needed for their health, and making it affordable. And they started to invest in other community projects around education and so forth. So that was a business doing business and everything else, but the people who were losing out were the shareholders. The people who were benefiting was the community that was consuming from that business. And that's an interesting social business model to explore further. It could be done for healthcare, it could be done for medical devices, it could be done for food delivery type systems and all the rest of it. And it would be quite an interesting concept to debate with businesses. Could you convert to a social business model? It's a bit to the side of our discussion, but I do think it's important.
Yeah, I think it is, and I would suggest to you that looking at the panel members we had today and yesterday and even now, there were a group of us, if you remember, who said yes, we should come together to find a way of addressing the situation of demystifying the international trade activities. From that point of view, I think there is a willingness, isn't there, to do precisely that, to come together. So
if there was coming together to share thoughts and experiences, what would be the platform to disseminate it out? How do you see that?
I think that's one of the points for discussion. I mean, we had FSB on this morning. Does it go through one of the trade associations? Does it go in a different route? We don't know. I think that's the platform. We have the REU, quite a large opportunity there. Who knows, until really we sit down and distill the ideas that come onto the table. I think it's a bit of a blue sky gaze to start with, because it's not being disseminated properly at the moment, as we quite rightly said, and yet there are big and large organizations doing precisely that. But there's still a gross lack of understanding amongst SMEs about international trade, was the conclusion we came to this morning.
I think perhaps what's needed is a mapping of those organizations who are doing things and what they're actually doing, and then what is their connection. So it's almost like a little sort of complexity theory exercise to try and see where the connections are, and then identify where the hot links are that could, for the least amount of effort, could have the most amount of impact.
That's right.
I know that in theory, but not in practice, so don't ask me to do it. But I understand the principles behind it, shall I say, that it's just, we do it informally as our networking, but maybe it needs to be mapped in some way so we can actually see who's involved with what and where there are synergies.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, conferences do a good job of that. And it was interesting. I attended a conference in London. It was the African Financial Services and Investment Conference. And I thought from the description, it sounded like all levels of businesses, micro, SME, large, all welcome, turned up. And sure, lots of SMEs, but also lots of government-backed organizations and, the big boys doing massive deals in Africa dominated that conference. And I remember just sort of sitting in lots of different rooms and listening, and it was quite interesting just hearing, but I never got the sense you'd actually really know. So going back to what Richard is saying about, you know, who are the players, what are they doing, and how are they doing it? Never really quite getting the sense that you'll actually ever find out how they're doing it. So there's got to be an equivalence, I think, for the SME sector. And I do think there's a lot more transparency amongst us. That was definitely something I noted was missing, because some of these deals, they're not deals you'd ever hear about ordinarily.
Well, I think that's true. And I think, again, from the discussion we had this morning, there is that willingness to sit down and find a route for SMEs, because it was totally acknowledged that there is a vast gap between understanding and reality.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's one of the things we would take forward from the meetings we had. And I think, Ravish, the same thing probably applies in India, doesn't it? SMEs are not necessarily understanding how.
Absolutely. So I do agree with Richard, Garu, and you know, it's been brilliant to hear them out. And that's exactly what's happening at the grassroots level with a lot of, so I can only talk about restaurants and the people associated with our businesses. The pandemic, post-pandemic, there has been a flurry of people, you know, collaborating with each other, trying to get their, you know, strengths together and take it forward. Because there is an opportunity on that to grow. Individually, nobody today in India, especially the SMEC or restaurateurs or bars or, you know, breweries, especially brew there are Pune is home for all the homegrown microbreweries. So they're all collaborating with the restaurants. They're not putting their front end. They're collaborating, and all of us are also collaborating. Like I'm trying to collaborate my bakery business with some other manufacturer and try and take it forward. So that's the future now going forward. There is no individual, you cannot go forward as me. So that's very interesting that it's happening world over. We thought probably it's an Indian phenomena, but that's great to hear that out.
I actually have a question for Ravish. So there's a theory that emerging markets should collaborate and partner with emerging markets. What do you think about that?
Well, great. Absolutely. You will find very enterprising entrepreneurs who are trying to get out and trying to do tie-up. I see especially the new entrepreneur, the age group today is all 23, 24, 25, 30 years old. They're not doing jobs anymore. They are less on jobs, and they all want to be startups, and they are dying to tie up with somebody internationally. So that if that forum is created, I do see a lot of progress on that front.
Okay. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's my list of questions without people bringing them in. I have others that are much simpler than that, but I think we'll leave those for today. Have you got any points you want to discuss before we close the meeting? Well, if not, first of all, let me thank you for joining us, and thank you for those who've been on the panels for the last 2 days. I think we've got some things to go forward with, and I will be contacting you to discuss those in more detail. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for the inputs, and thank you for some very lively discussions. And Ravish, I think we'll get you a new microphone next time you're on the panel.
Sure. A new phone, iPhone 10.
And a big red button.
And a big red button.
Without a red button.
It's a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Roger.
Take care.